Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Tyler Lennon Show. On behalf of Chad's Media and Front Porch News, I'm Kayla Price, filling in for Tyler. Before we get started with our program today, we want to say thank you to our supporting sponsors, Avco Roofing in Sulphur Springs, the Beauty Parlor in Sulphur Springs, Robin Bashir's Chiropractic with Lone Star Clinic, and Realtor Lindsay Lee with the Watson Company in Sulphur Springs. We have a very special show for you today, a person that you all know due to her distinguished career, Enola Gay Matthews.
Oh, Kayla. Thank you for that introduction. And
Welcome.
It is a pleasure and a thrill to be here and once again to be able to talk to the masses.
Excellent. Well, you are very good at it. For decades, most of us started our day with the Good Morning Show with Enola Gay on KSST Radio 1230 AM. Enola retired on December 24th, 2021. Enola, after 32 years on radio, most of it on air, you probably have lots of great memories and stories. What was your most interesting interview?
Well, I thought about this question. I didn't want to point to one interesting interview because there were so many, Kayla, so many. And as times changed and people I knew grew up and went into different professions, they'd come back for different reasons. So I would have to say, I had the privilege to get to know so many different personalities, like over a broad sweep of topics, like poets coming in to read their work, and of course they want to sell their books, and authors of books as well, and musicians who would come in to talk about their music, but of course play something, an excerpt from their work. Singers, they sang for us, songwriters talking about their songs, and not just local either. There were folks passing through from Nashville or folks coming from California. Once in a while, maybe they had local connections and a reason to know about KSST. But we used our Channel 18 TV camera as well in our interviews for most of them. Doug Haston running the camera always. And even once a trainer from a zoo came with a lion cub. He brings his lion cub, who demolished a stuffed teddy bear. Every few minutes they'd have to give him a new teddy bear.
Oh, my.
But he was quite something to see play. And a couple of fishermen, they brought in their prize catch one day and told us how and where they caught it, fresh off the lake. We got I had a world-known cowboy who actually lives in our area, Rope Myers, world champion. He's still in rodeo. The director of the U.S. Marshal Service, Donald Washington, who actually comes from Sulphur Springs but was appointed by Trump to that position. Comedy performers, a ventriloquist, a magician, some trained dogs. I went through all the episodes I could remember. Those are my favorite interviews.
Excellent. Well, how did you get into radio?
Well, I'd had no background in it, even as far as listenership. We lived in Longview. We listened to some Shreveport. In fact, there were some jingles I could maybe sing you from radio that I remember back in those days, the 50s. And I don't know, it was purely accident that I got into radio here in Sulphur Springs.
You want to share a jingle?
Oh, I should have prepped on that. It might come to me later.
Okay, we'll come back to that one. How's that? Was this ever a career you could have imagined?
No, I was working in fast food. Mel Price of the old KDXC came in at least once a week to eat there and kept telling me, we've got an opening, you should apply. I don't know why. I was back there with the hamburgers, mostly when he told me that. But finally, at a fall festival, we had a booth. He had a booth, and I was passing through with my family, and he said, here's your application. And so I put it in, and I was hired.
Wow, he saw something. He saw that great personality is what he saw.
I don't know about that.
What would you consider the highlight of your radio career?
Well, there's just so many things, and I've been so blessed. I'm undeservedly blessed with all that's happened and all the love that I feel from the community. But I want to tell you a little bit what happened one time. It was at a very special moment. My boss, Bill Bradford, as everyone knows, and he was my boss for 25 years, distinguished broadcaster, pioneer in radio. He made his lifetime home base in Sulphur Springs, although he was not from here. And that year, meek and mild radio announcer me was nominated for the Hopkins County Woman of the Year award at the Chamber banquet. So I was called and I went up and received. I wasn't allowed to speak. They didn't give me the mic, so I come back to my seat. And as you know, the recipients list is top secret. So all of us were surprised, including my boss. So he was sitting there near our table, stage side, carrying the live broadcast with his headphones on. And as this happened, I got back to my seat and I was completely breathless. And I felt this little rushing of air next to me, and he kissed me on the cheek. It was a thrill I couldn't even describe. I mean, it was so out of the blue. He hurried right back to his little stool, stage side, and it was a thrilling shock. And it displayed his obvious pride in me that I didn't know he had. And he never said it. But somebody captured this kiss on the cheek with the photograph, which they brought to me. And it is among my dearest possessions.
Wonderful. That's a great highlight. So what were your favorite aspects of that job?
Well, starting out at KDXE, I sold advertising by phone. There was no room in the small office over on Glover Street for any more desks, so I was back in the transmitter room. It was cold back there at a little corner. It was more like a school desk I was at, but I worked through that, and I went on to KBUS in Paris, where I also sold advertising and could record commercials, but was never allowed on the air, although I was kind of promised I'd have it. Anyway, it didn't happen. So I came back to Sulphur Springs and then was hired at KSST. So through my years as an on-air personality, which I finally got that position, communicating with the listeners by phone mostly, also letters. Back in those days, they would write us. Back in the 90s, later emails, the creativity, the spontaneity, the music, play and request that people, sometimes I had a double turntable there in the control room, put a 45 on. You know that's going to be about 3 minutes. Dash to the back, get some out of the library, run in, put it on, and switch right over to the next thing they wanted to hear. That's how busy the morning show was. It was all live.
You got your workout.
I got my workout. It was a pleasure of being connected to the community in the most unique kind of way that there is. I want to tell you another thing, and I don't want to... Can I take up a lot of time?
You can, yes. This is all about you.
Let me tell you what happened, and this was in 2016. This was a major opportunity that I missed, but it came because of the morning show. So it had to do with the recent movie called Deepwater Horizon. You know, it's a disaster movie, the big blow up on the oil rig and all that. Well, Mark Wahlberg starred in this, and the Good Morning Show entered into this movie, at least behind the scenes. I got a call from this lady. I was just busy doing my work this morning, and they told me out front, you have a call on line 4. So I talked to her. She says, I am so-and-so calling from a movie production studio in New York. And I'm like, is this another one of those pranks from out at Sulphur Bluff? But no, she identified herself, and she said, it's a little bit of a long story, but let me recap it for you on the phone here. We have become aware that the man whose life story we are depicting in this movie lived in Sulphur Springs at the time of the disaster. And he went into his kitchen to make his coffee, and he would listen to you on the radio every morning. So he told us all his story, of course, when we were writing out the screenplay. Well, they wanted me to record some light cuts from a typical morning show. Don't say what season of the year it is, what time of day it is, just very typical good morning. And they would hopefully get to use that in the movie. Well, she said, now I got to warn you, it might end up on the cutting floor, and it did. But just to get the chance to have affected that person enough that he spoke that.
Yes, yes.
It was a thrill.
And that Hollywood knew. That is neat. You alluded to something talking about putting the 45s on to play. Obviously, there was a lot of change in 30 years. What things changed for your job in those 30 years?
Well, the whole world as we knew it, and it affected everyone. And in hometown radio, from the 1990s, hometown radio, and then to life after 2000, if there was a line we could draw of when the change took place. The development of the internet changed our lives for the better, question mark, for everybody, and how we communicate with each other. And basically, and all broadcast equipment, everything changed at that time.
So that was the impetus for no more 45s?
Well, I guess some stations do, but we stopped.
All righty. Well, you mentioned Bill Bradford, of course, for those who may not remember or too young to remember. He was a legendary radio station owner and personality here in Sulphur Springs, and a great person. Everybody knew Bill, and he did a lot, in addition to the radio, did a lot for our community.
Yes.
In volunteer fashions as well. What was it like to work with Mr. Bradford?
Well, he stood for a lot of very strong values. And I have to say, I had a mom and dad, and we had a house we lived in, and I went to school, but I did lack a strong male role in my life. I did. And I was 35 when I came to this job. I had been married, I had my children. Still, this kind of, although he was short in stature, he stood tall for everyone in this community. And those are the kind of values that I reaped the most benefit out of.
So he was a good role model.
He was.
Somebody to work with. When this is just me being nosy, I guess, we all are so used to turning on the radio when bad weather, was in the area, to listen to Mr. Bradford and to get the latest and, reports from locals seeing the action on the ground. Were you there with him? Were you working those strange hours all day and night to bring that information to folks?
Many times, yes. Many times I listened from home, because, like everyone else, because it was not a time that I would naturally be there. And pretty much he could always handle things on his own. But yes, I had the shift that began at 4:30 a.m. So many times if a storm was blowing through, and he would come up there when I was already there, and we would interchange our comments to the public that way. Sometimes storms came in the daytime. He might need help answering phones. I'd go back out if needed.
Excellent. Do you have a Bill Bradford story that you can share with us?
Well, I knew the questions you were going to ask me.
You're giving away our secrets.
Oh, I wanted to come up with the very best cherry on the top of things, but I just have to try to relate this one from my viewpoint inside. Let's say it is election night. We have a heated election between this candidate and all of them local, largely local, although we covered state and national as well through our other connections, media connections. But this would happen at an election. It would be the night for the returns to come in, and I'd watch him cover from his desk. I'd say it was probably a historic one, depending on the election, of course, but we'd cover all these areas that I mentioned. And when the polls would close on election night, the staff would be there, and we all go into this mechanism that we did. Our information would come from our news director at the courthouse or wherever the results were. Again, before technology took over. So news came in by AP wire, then we were still using that, and by fax, and we'd have someone watching the fax machine. We'd take results by phone from, and some of the local races, of course, from trusted sources there. And Brad would be at his desk in his office, which if you walked in the front door of the radio station, you could see right into his office. His microphone and recording setup were already there, so the listeners could be part of this whole process. And our crew would feed him the fax reports and totals that we were taking by phone. Sometimes he'd just say, walk up and report what you hear, what you know. And there was a mic for us standing there. And from the precincts and from our reporters that were out on the scene, it was often live. Channel 18 was on there too most of the time. For those who had cable, they could see that. And it all went out just as it happened. There was really no filters. no trying to make it sound a certain way. It just went out as it happened. And it was never chaos, but close sometimes, and always truthful and trusted information relayed responsibly. And if I could put anything in capitals, it would be like that. No fake news in those days with Bill Bradford. He would not let that ever occur. And unofficial, of course, until canvassed, but he was amazing. He, in doing this small act for his community that would take 2 or 3 hours of his time one evening, he placed our American freedoms to vote in the spotlight by putting the election process into play before our eyes and ears. Of course, he reported because it was his job, but he allowed us to see the process. It was exciting to be there. I would always bring him a cup of hot coffee every once in a while as he worked, but it was heady times back then, working live with the radio station, and not just here. That proved the power of radio in the hometowns all across this country. When I came on the scene in the 90s, and even a short time after that, working with him was a privilege that I never took for granted, and it was amazing every day.
Just off the cuff, do you think part of his excellentness, I guess, if that's a word, on air, was it gut instinct, or was it training, or a little bit of both?
As far as I know, he had no local training. As far as I know, he had no college education.
Okay.
He was an educated man, however, a well-read man. He was a genius. He was an innovator. It might be a small thing to write a script, but that script he wrote that you might hear in a time of emergency through your television or radio, I don't know what other sources now, this is a test. This is only a test. If it had not been a test, you would have been instructed to go to your local sources. That still stands with the emergency broadcast service as the script he wrote way back there when they were just forming these channels for people for their safety.
That is amazing. So it tied to Bill Bradford and the Sulphur Springs with what we hear on our TVs. Okay. Did he ever provide you with any tips or words of wisdom that you could share with us?
Well, respect for the microphone always, and this came in little stages along through the years. I can tell you a brief example of that. I sat in the control room, which had 2 glass booths outside that. There was a Saturday morning preacher who would come in, and I worked Saturday mornings then, and he would sit in the booth and put his headphones on, and when I said go, he would talk into his mic for 30 minutes was his sermon. And in the meantime, I'm in the control room. I kind of listen, and I'm watching him, and I'm watching the time and doing other things. So I get this phone call. So I'm on the phone, and I'm talking about to this person. I'm gesturing and talking, just having a great conversation, because I know I have plenty of time, and no one can hear me. So Brad comes in, and he taps me on the shoulder, and he says, when I got off the phone, he says, I want you to know that when the preacher's here, you need to be low-key and keep him in your line of sight at all times. This gesticulating and being crazy may be distracting for him. So let's be aware. Of course, I never made that mistake again.
Sure.
But mostly he lived his advice, his honesty, responsibility, listening, caring about the people, all those things. He lived it and demonstrated it.
Well, speaking of living it, I know with your career, you've probably picked up lots of tips that you might be willing to share with folks considering going into broadcasting or media of some sort. Do you have anything you could provide?
Equipment has changed so much. Settings have changed so much. The intent, the intent of what we share over the airwaves is changed to some extent. Maybe we're not so naively honest as we might have been back in my day, but if to any person, if you can get a job where you can be live on the air, and if you treat that privilege with respect, you can have a satisfying work no matter what your pay grade is. It'll be satisfying to you.
Excellent, thank you. Another passion, I want to kind of segue from radio over onto your other passion, which is singing. How did you get into singing?
I heard my mother sing at home. My daddy took me to a few quartets. He would take me, although we didn't go to this type of church, take me to where there would be quartets, men's quartets singing. They would be from out of town. There would be special guests. We'd go and sit and watch and see the response from the audience. I guess that entered in somehow. But in grade school, I and my friend Nancy, we sang little harmony songs, and we'd do it for PTA programs and at church programs. When my own daughters were coming up, I have 4 daughters, they became the Singing Bound sisters, of course, with their mother's oversight, and sang for school things, and that's mostly what I was able to do back then. But I always wanted to sing in front of a crowd. I always wanted to sing in front of an orchestra.
Mm. So, do you have a favorite genre of music?
Western swing is my top because it is so kin to jazz. Well, it incorporates the agricultural element of country with the distinguished musicality of jazz, the complicated work that the musicians do. So I say Western swing and jazz, pop, lots of pop songs, those big band dance numbers and classics, timeless lyrics and rhythms that we still find in that music.
And of that genre, do you have a favorite song that you like to sing?
Well, I always loved Stardust. Sometimes I wonder. That's where the rhythm begins to come.
Beautiful. Are you currently in a band? I know you've been with several or had several through the years.
I've been privileged to have several bands, and we didn't make much money. Not money was the thing. It was getting to do the music was the thing. And not now, although my earliest was called Bob, Ray, Dawn, and Enola Gay. Don Hammond is the only one of that group still living besides myself, and I hope he's listening to this. Kurt Bittner and I were a duo for close to 10 years together. My latest band was for the Jamboree, and at one time it was the Roger Reed Band, or the Sunshine Band in reference to the earliest Jamboree band. And then most recently, Running Creek, and we named the band Running Creek for the creek that runs through Riley Springs out in that beloved part of our county. But now I'm in a duo with Mike Sheen, and we do country and live pop. Oh, and we do Kenny Rogers and Dottie West duets. We do George and Tammy duets. Love all that stuff. We perform for holiday parties, and usually each year for the Hopkins County Ms. Hopkins County Senior Pageant. We like to do that.
Excellent. We'll have to all be on the lookout. You mentioned the Jamboree, and I did want to talk a little bit about that with you. So you're the person responsible for bringing it back to life, and for that alone, you deserve a debt of gratitude to from our community. But I did want to see if you would share a little bit about the history of the Jamboree with folks in case they aren't aware.
I would love to do that, and it's very close to my heart. I did revive the Jamboree in 1995 in April of that year. I wanted to make a test, not that I had any background in putting on a stage show, no background at all. I just knew how they did it and thought I'd give it a try. It was great response from the public. Standing room only. If you've been in our VFW hall, the ballroom, standing room only in there. That's who turned out for this Jamboree, the very first one. And so I kept it going for 26 years. The last show was in the spring of 2021. Its history, we would best reach a lady named Francelle Burnett in Winsboro, whom I know you know.
Yes. My mom was her school teacher back in the day, and so my middle name is actually Francelle. So, little connection.
I hope Francelle knows that.
Yes, she does. My mom always said she hoped that I could sing and play the accordion like Francelle, and of course I can do neither of the two.
Have you ever tried to play the accordion?
No.
Okay.
And my singing would make the cats scream and run. So, yeah.
Well, if the Riley Springs Jamboree would have no history if it weren't for Francelle, and I hope she watches this. I talk to her frequently. As a teenager going to Winsboro High School, the show started up in 1956, and by Bob and Joe Shelton, who was really named Addlesey, but it was too hard to say Addlesey or else spell it, so they were instructed by the music authorities to have a shorter name. They used, I think, their mother's maiden name. Bob and Joe Shelton. There were other brothers in the family, too, who sometimes played in the band or sang with them, but they went on to, I won't say nationwide notoriety, but regional, definitely, into the Metroplex and across the South. They wrote songs, they performed, they were on many of the big country stage shows of the day. But when they were home, they'd put on the show at Riley Springs at the old schoolhouse. And so that's how the Jamboree got started. Well, Francelle, whom I guess was probably 17 or 18 at the time, would come over, and she played the accordion. And she would play, but that's not all she did. She met every one of the big stars. I say Johnny Cash, June Carter, George Jones, String Bean. Does anyone remember the comedian String Bean? There was everyone. Right now I'm going blank, of course, but all the big names of country from the 60s. She took their picture many times with her in the picture, and she got their autograph. And all these were saved. All of them appear on her website, and many of them hanging in the Riley Springs Community Center today on the walls that constitutes the history of this show. We would not have it if it weren't for Francelle, a teenager, with the foresight that she exhibited.
So what is that website, in case anybody wants to look at those pictures?
There is RileySpringsJamboree.com, REILLY, I believe is correct. That's Francelle's, and it has lots of video and archives of old shows. Then there's the RileySpringsJamboree.com, which is one I used for a time. It is not updated, and we're not holding shows at this time.
Okay. Good to know. And can I ask, what inspired you to get the Jamboree going again? Was it something you had heard about, or was there a particular incident?
Yes, I started with the radio station in the very late 80s. And so those days of the Jamboree, and through the years it had been sporadically run by various musicians who would come forward and do some shows. But they told me about it. The listeners told me. One time I asked Brad, how would I find out some piece of information? I can't find anything out about this. He said, ask the listeners. They're your biggest source of information. So when you posed a question on the morning show, the responses would come in. That's how I heard about it.
Okay, excellent. So you had mentioned that the last performance at the Jamboree was in 2021. When can we expect to see the Jamboree back?
That's a delicate subject for me. At this time it is shuttered, and it really needs to be reorganized, and new talent, not just talent, but new drive behind it, definitely. I had very gratifying things happen, though, last fall that links all of this I've been telling you about up till now with the present. I was at a festival, first ever, called the Cowtown Birthplace of Western Swing. The whole purpose of all the research that led up to this festival and the documentary that I'm about to tell you about was for the purpose of forevermore nailing down the fact that the genre of Western swing music originated in Fort Worth, Texas. Now, it had its influences, like most music does, other musical influences. So in watching this documentary with the audience, the first showing of it, whose picture pops up but Bob and Joe Shelton as influencers of Western swing in the early days. That was probably the most gratifying thing of all my years of loving and trying to document Western swing. It was that. I was on the right track the whole time.
Wow. Interesting to know. Next up, we're actually going to get a little more personal with Enola.
Oh.
She may be running out of the studio now. But before that, we're going to hear a little bit about our supporting sponsors. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Lee, realtor at Caldwell Banker Watson Company in Sulphur Springs. Born and raised in Hopkins County, I am the small town realtor you are looking for to help buy or sell your home. I specialize in farm and ranch, residential, and lake properties. Contact me today and let me do the work for you. Get your key with Lindsay Lee.
I am Dr. Robin Boshears Patrick, located at Lone Star Clinic. I am a Sulphur Springs, Texas native, and I am dedicated to serving the chiropractic needs of my community. Call me today to set up your appointment, and let's get you straightened out.
At Avco Roofing, we strive to fulfill our mission statement of protecting homes, strengthening families, and building community. It's more than a slogan. It's the heartbeat of who we are and how we serve our customers. Located in Sulphur Springs near I-30 and Broadway, there's no project we can't handle. Call Avco Roofing for all your home and commercial property needs.
Hi, I'm Audra Clark, owner and stylist of the Beauty Parlor. We are located at 206 West Shannon Road in Sulphur Springs, Texas. We are Tony and Guy trained, and we specialize in custom cut and color. You're already beautiful. Come let us highlight it.
We are back with Enola Gay, who was the host of the Good Morning Show with Enola Gay for over 3 decades. So we're going to be continuing our discussion and talking a little bit more about you. For thousands of listeners from across the globe, they've always felt like they knew you because they heard you every day. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about maybe some of the things they didn't know. So you mentioned you grew up in Longview, Texas. So what was that like? Tell us about your childhood.
I was born in Odessa, but spent my whole childhood in Longview, and the 50s and 60s. That's when you know, the outdoors were safe. We kids walked to school. We rode our bikes and played outside all weekend. It's been well documented in television shows, but it was just like that. It was small town. I do not remember listening to the radio. It wasn't part of our at-home scene for some reason, though.
And Enola, you obviously have a very interesting name. Some folks may not know the origin. Would you tell about where your name comes from and how you acquired that name?
My mother named me for the plane called Enola Gay that dropped the very first atomic bomb and on Hiroshima on August 6th of 1945. Effectively ending World War II. So it was a huge historic event with the flight of that plane. Now, there was a second plane in case the Japanese had not got the message well enough. The second plane flew on August 9th called Boxcar, B-O-C-K-S, car. Thankfully, she didn't name me after that.
Yeah.
But even today, all these years later, when I introduce myself or am asked what my name is, I'll usually see a flicker of recognition, usually, even if it's a younger person, if they've paid attention to history. That's how I got my name. Mother named me for the plane. She thought it was pretty. My dad did not go to the service, and I had no other connection.
Well, it certainly has made you stand out and be very memorable. So, lovely name.
It has served as a good radio name.
A good intro, huh? I'm getting really deep here, so what gives meaning to your life?
Well, off the top, gardening, which I hope to do more of since I'm now supposedly retired. Books, every day is some reading time. Of course, I read the Bible too. That is a study. The other is light. It helps me relax or go to sleep. My children, my house, which is our home. The house is a work in progress. It's a historic structure built in 1895, just a buggy ride from town on South Davis Street. And my mother, who has passed away but is with me daily, more so as I age. My mother's values and ways that she did things are with me all the time. And I guess I'd have to say meaning to my life is values. Values that really matter, but they don't really ever change. They're evergreen.
Well, thank you. One of your many assets on the Good Morning Show was that you were always happy and upbeat. How do you have that joy?
Well, this is truly one of my values, that we should give whatever it is we have to give. If we have money, time, if we have possessions, sources, whatever, we should give. But if all we have is a good word, a pat on the back or a pat on the arm, eye-to-eye contact that lets a person know, I know what you're talking about. Those are all ways of giving, and so I felt that was the best way that I could convey a giving on a regular daily basis. Entering into their morning, for those who are listening, not bringing any of my own baggage. Hey, hope your day is great. Here's what you're going to find when you go out the door. Here's what we're having for lunch today at school. It's all upbeat. It's kind of like Sam and Charlene or Lydia or Dana. They send out flowers. And I've always thought that being a flower delivery person, all you do is make people smile.
Yes.
You're giving something good.
I
It's
did
sort
that
of
for
like
my
that.
sister for a few years. So.
Did you?
Yes, when she had a flower shop.
That's right, she did, right next to Marie Orwoski.
And people would light up. Well, you definitely gave away free flowers every day, I guess, on the radio
I
station.
tried to.
It came across, and I think however we start our day is how we end our day. So I think that happiness really meant a lot to our community and any listener.
I want to add one little thing before we get too far away from the morning show.
Sure.
This is how the public helped me in a great big way. This is a little bit of a reminiscence. Friendship and partnership through listening to local radio. It still has a place. People say, oh, people don't listen to the radio anymore. I'm not going to debate that with them, but around the perimeter of Hopkins County were people, of course, who were listening, who were willing to be our eyes and ears out there. So imagine back in the day before we had the internet, you couldn't look up and see what the forecast was going to be. You heard it on the radio or you looked out the window. Well, we had our spotters and stringers out there who could look outside and see what was going on, and not only weather, road conditions, a wreck on the highway, something holding up traffic, whatever was going on, they could report that, and they would. So I had Penny Valentine out at Penny's Cafe north of town on Highway 19, heading to Paris. Betty at the Pine Forest store, she could tell me from the people out there, and that was far to our east. She'd call me or I would call her. Mrs. Burney, whose first name I can't remember right now, she was postmistress at Brashear. If you see the Brashear post office high up above the interstate at that bridge, she could see east and west. She could see a long way. She could tell us if there was a holdup on the road, if the roads were too icy, traffic moving slowly, trucks moving slowly, nobody moving. And it let us be able to share that with listeners in Sulphur Springs from the radio station. A good friend, Roy Smith, out at Poor Folks Slope, as he called it, on Rocky Ridge. He would call in, let us know how it was out there, or with rainfall reports. And later, Ed and Brenda Payne, they carry on that tradition for the radio station. Another friend, she was aged at the time, but Leela Roberts, she lived behind that big roadside park when you're going east, Franklin County lines, a big roadside park, and trucks stop there. She lived behind there. She could see everything that was going on as far as traffic going down that direction. So we had kind of a working community in a grassroots style, and it actually worked. And it worked more than just that morning's forecast. It worked to make us a family. Our body of listenership, we celebrated our holidays together. We had precious times, stories like Bradford's The General's Christmas Tree and Merry Christmas from the Moon with the real first astronaut speaking. And they would send in their Christmas cards. We'd read every one. It would be dozens of cards received through the holiday season. Channel 18 would be there to document that, and those are still being played on Channel 18 and KSST today. A treasure.
It is a treasure, and that, of course, those holiday cards were some of your final swan song, I guess. You wanted to read those last ones, so that's how you ended up with December 24th as your retirement date. So
I wouldn't leave before then.
I think that's what has endeared the radio stations in our local community, our local radio personalities, is just the fact that it was a community effort. You mentioned all the people involved in making the weather report so successful and keeping everyone involved.
And to add now, if I could, Chad and Rhonda Young are now owners of KSST, and they came in with greater technology. They added their website and now a YouTube channel, and you can see all kinds of things from our community right there, still in our hometown.
Carrying on that tradition. Well, now, I think you segued away from us talking about your personal stuff, so I'm going to segue back. You had mentioned you enjoyed gardening. What other hobbies do you enjoy?
Well, I want to get back to sewing. My mother sewed. She always sewed. She sewed just anything, our clothes. She made a lot of crafts. We did some quilting. I know there's a lot of ladies in Hopkins County who are professional top grade quilters. I'm not among that group. I do kind of the everyday stuff. I make quilts, but they're not showpieces. And I want to do more of that. I want to do some watercolor painting again, which I have loved from my school days. I think you do watercolor?
Yes, not as well as you, I'm sure. I'm learning, teaching myself. So what about with your quilts? Do you think you would ever display at the Lone Star Quilt Show?
I did display once, but it was not one I made.
Oh.
It was one I was given. A postage stamp. The squares are this big.
Oh, wow.
It is an antique, and it is an heirloom.
And what's this scene? Is it floral or just a pattern?
No, it's a pattern. It's not even a star. It's a lot of blocks.
Interesting.
Oh, but the lady who made that, she lived in Galveston. She was the grandmother of some dear neighbors. And when I first got married, they gave me that quilt for my wedding gift.
Oh, how nice. Nice memento. Wow. A lot of effort went into that. What is something that folks might not know about you that you'd be willing to share?
Well, I'm a 20-year member of the Hopkins County Sheriff's Posse and now secretary of the posse.
And I believe on the internet I saw pictures of you, maybe with the posse. So for folks interested in seeing more, there's some other good information out there. And you mentioned your family and your daughters. Tell us a little bit more about your family.
My son Clay is getting close to 50 years old now. He is currently, he's still pursuing his master's degree, law enforcement academy, many other things he's got cooking right now. But he lives at Campbell, and so I get to see him. He's the only one that lives close. And I have 3 daughters remaining, and they live in Lubbock, Oklahoma City, and Richmond, Virginia. Actually, Mechanicsville, Virginia. I haven't got to visit her yet. And then the children of my daughter Jamie live in Allen, and they have been raised by their father and are doing so well. All graduated. The twins, the youngest, they will graduate this spring from Allen High School. And getting them there has been a journey and a privilege for the rest of our family who have helped.
Excellent. So it sounds like you have lots of kids and grandkids you can visit.
15 grandchildren.
15. Wow. Wonderful. Okay, gonna embarrass you a little more. So here we go. County Judge Robert Newsom has described you as a local legend, and Sulphur Springs Senior Citizen Director Karen Weatherman has called you an icon of this town.
Hopkins County Judge Cletus Millsap had a name or two for me too back in those days.
Well, what are those names?
I
Can
don't
you
remember.
tell us? Okay.
I don't remember. I wouldn't
Maybe
say.
we can get Judge Millsap to share that with us so we can let folks know. You've been recognized for your many talents with several awards throughout the year, so now I want to really embarrass you and share those. You were named Disc Jockey of the Year by Cowtown Society of Western Music, as well as inducted into their Hall of Fame. May 13th of 2011, you were declared as Hopkins County's Enola Gay Day. In 2012, you were named DJ of the Year by the Academy of Western Artists. In 2012, you were also nominated for DJ of the Year by the Texas Music Association. You were named the 2014 Woman of the Year by Beta Sigma Phi at the Hopkins County Chamber of Commerce banquet. And in 2020, Texas Governor Greg Abbott gave you the Yellow Rose of Texas Award, which is, in case folks aren't familiar, the highest honor a Texas woman can achieve, and it's particularly for those who have demonstrated outstanding volunteer and community service. Of all the accolades, all the awards, all the honors, what means the most to you?
I'd have to say that Yellow Rose of Texas Award. What woman who receives that could say anything else? It totally came out of the blue. I had some questions asked of me for over a several-month period that I won.
Sneaky, huh?
Sneaky. To me, I'm going to use that, the pride in that, as sort of a Lifetime Achievement Award. I do not deserve it. I don't deserve any of these things. I feel that way. So many more deserving women, and even in our community, who have excelled in community service. They can also be Yellow Rose of Texas recipients if someone nominates them and goes through that process. Of course, the governor's office has the final say, but it's a huge privilege. I have to refer to my notes. Yes, I thank Karen Weatherman so much for allowing that to come to its full. There was another Yellow Rose of Texas that I know of from here, and it was, she was 110. She was the oldest woman in Texas.
Was it the Clara Bridges, what the award is named for?
She was among that recognition,
Okay.
but this was very special. She only lived a few more months after she got this Yellow Rose of Texas award, and we did that at the senior center, and everyone, her family, gathered around. But as far as I know, she and I are the only two of Hopkins County.
Excellent. Well, just spending time with you preparing for this interview, I did note how you never wanted to accept. You always said, but it was the listener, it was Bill, but that was an award, that was all you. So yes, Karen may have been sneaky and asked questions and got people to help her, but you won that award because you deserved it, and you should be very proud of it. So you worked hard, even though that wasn't the goal, you worked hard for our community, and it meant a lot to receive that.
Thank you.
So I want to talk a little bit about the future, because we all knowing Enola, she has lots of energy, lots of interest, and lots of creativity. So what does the future hold for you?
Well, I want to continue writing. I didn't start out speaking, but writing can be done at any age. You see, if you want to choose something that's going to last you a while, I think writing might be a good way to express yourself, as maybe we get to where we can't do this physically anymore or that physically anymore. I love to ride horses, but I don't know if I will really ride anymore. I'm too cautious of a broken bone now. But my experience has been mostly reporting, mostly human interest stories or business histories or things that matter in a local community. Published articles in the Millennium Shopper for many years here locally. And so I want to continue in that vein. There are still so many stories yet to tell. Maybe one day I'll write my story. I say I'll write a book. I don't know if I ever will. I don't know how to write a book.
Well, I think that this may be the catalyst for maybe getting that going. Just reviewing all your notes and dreaming up all those memories and experiences. So I hope you do, and I hope we get to read that very soon. Are there any goals, maybe other than a book, any goals that you still want to accomplish?
Well, I want to complete my house. As I said earlier, that's a work in progress. I don't know if I'll live long enough to get it done the way I would like to have it done. I would like to do some traveling, and I know you were going to ask me about that. I don't have huge goals. I've gotten to go on 2 or 3 cruises. I'm not particularly a cruise person, but the places in Texas, the little out-of-the-way places and the marvelous landscapes that we only see in books or online. I want to go see those things. I want to go to Dripping Springs. I haven't been to the Rio Grande.
So those are what I had heard about was you had a Texas travel bucket list. So those are items from your bucket list, I take it. Dripping Springs and...
I want to do recurring ones too. I just love to go to Austin in the springtime. I want to pass through Salado and see the bluebonnets, Salado Creek, all the little stops along the way. And I love to go to Austin. I remember when we could just walk through in one door and out the other at the Capitol.
A little bit's changed on that, huh? So you're an author, a writer. What subjects do you like to write about, and where can folks read your writing?
Well, subjects that just come up, I would say, human interest or history attached. But currently, I work for the Winsboro News. I'm creative director there, so my job is to find creative stories out there that haven't been told for the Winsboro News. I also write for the Community Chronicle, which is a monthly publication owned by the same people, Chuck and Nancy Roy. And it's about 6 years old. I've been writing for it for a while, as do many volunteer writers from around the area. And in addition to Winsboro News and Community Chronicle, the same organization will soon open the Mount Vernon News, which is a newspaper much needed over in that area.
Wonderful. It'll be nice to have that one back.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to share with folks that when you've performed in your past, you always had a way that you closed out your show, a special song that you did. And I wanted to see if you would share that with us just so we could get a little taste, a reminder of that beautiful voice you have and those performances that folks have heard through the years.
I'd love to. I'd love to sing for you. And in doing so, it would be a message to everyone listening, a message to you. Thank you to Chad and Logan here and everyone involved in this this form of media that our town now has. And it's just called I Wish You Love, and it's appropriate. It's almost Valentine's Day.
That is true.
I wish you bluebirds in the spring, and in your heart a song to sing, and then a kiss. But more than this, I wish you love. And in July a lemonade to cool you in some leafy glade. I wish you health, but more than wealth, I wish you love. And that's from the heart.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for doing that. I did want to give you one last word. Do you have any thank yous you want to extend from your career and your time here in Sulphur?
I tried to do that for you, Kayla. It is impossible to do.
Too long a list, huh?
I had some notes on that, but it boils down to this. Everyone who ever listened or watched us on Channel 18, everyone who ever called, everyone who is still a friend. I have a lady who still brings me fruit jars from Cornersville. When she empties a jar, she'll bring those because I needed them back in those days when I was canning. I want to do canning again. There's just too many thank yous to go out, but this is a good medium in which to send it out to through Chad's Media. So I hope you will accept that.
Yes, thank you so much. You have been a friend and a neighbor on the radio for folks for 3 decades now, and thank you for being such an integral part of the fabric of Sulphur Springs, and thank you for coming today and sharing and talking and singing and sharing those great memories. So we do appreciate it. And thank you very much to our sponsors. On behalf of Chad's Media and Front Porch News, we do want to thank them for making this program possible. And next time, Tyler will be back with another great interview. So until then, have a great day. Bye-bye.